So we'll begin. We haven't begun with this in a while, but why not? This story about stories about stories. When the great Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov saw misfortune threatening the world, it was his custom to go into a certain part of the forest to meditate. There he would light a fire, say a special prayer, and the miracle would be accomplished and the misfortune averted. Later, when his disciple, the celebrated Maggid of Mezrich, had occasion for the same reason to intercede with heaven, he would go to the same place in the forest and say, "Master of the universe, listen. I do not know how to light the fire, but I am still able to say the prayer." And again, the miracle would be accomplished. Still later, Rabbi Moshe Leib of Sasov, in order to save the people once more, would go into the forest and say, "I do not know how to light the fire. I do not know the prayer, but I know the place, and this must be sufficient." It was sufficient, and the miracle was accomplished. Then it fell to Rabbi Israel of Rizhin to overcome misfortune. Sitting in his armchair, his head in his hands, he spoke to God. "I'm unable to light the fire, and I do not know the prayer. I cannot even find the place in the forest. All I can do is tell the story, and this must be sufficient." And it was sufficient. For today, I'm going to, oh, look, there's another baseball fan. I can't see what it says. What does it say?
10023. My locus vivendi.
Ah, all right. Well, go Locust. Okay. So we're gonna. I'm gonna share my screen now, and hopefully it'll work. We're gonna begin a story. This is a story by Yehuda Leib Peretz. He was one of the great beginners of modern Yiddish literature. He wrote also in Hebrew. He died in 1915, so his career was from the 19th century into the beginning of the 20th century, and he's one of the giants of specifically Yiddish literature. Most of all, as I said, he also wrote in Hebrew. So this story, here it is, share screen. This story is hopefully will be of interest, and it's a kind of a legend kind of story. It works with very conventional types of old-time features of telling a story. And let's see how it comes out, and then what people think about it. Who would do us the honor of beginning us off? All right, John, go.
3 gifts, balancing scales. Ages ago, somewhere on this earth, a Jew died. Is there anything unusual about a Jew dying? Surely nobody can live forever. When the Jew passed away, he was buried in accordance with the usual rites. After the body was laid to rest and the orphaned son said Kaddish, the traditional prayer for the dead, the soul winged its way to the heavenly seat of judgment. On its arrival, it found the scales prepared, on which the court was to weigh all the earthly deeds, the good and the bad. The advocate of the deceased, formerly his good spirit, came up with a clean snow-white bag in his hand and took up his position near the right pan of the scales. The adversary of the deceased, formerly his evil spirit and tempter, came in with a dirty bag in his hand and took up his position near the left pan of the scales. The snow-white bag contained good deeds and the filthy black bag evil deeds. When the advocate poured from the contents of the clean bag onto the right pan, the good deeds spread a fragrance of perfume and shone like little stars in the sky. But when the adversary poured from the filthy bag on the left pan, sins came forth black as coal, and they smelled of pitch and tar. You have to scroll.
Sorry, I had a call there. Okay, spell pitch and tar.
Pitch and tar. The poor soul stood and looked and gaped in astonishment. I never imagined there was such a wide... It never imagined there was such a wide difference between good and evil, since on the earth both often seem so alike that he easily mistook one for the other. The pans of the scale moved slowly up and down, now one side ascending, now the other. The pointer of the scale high above the pans trembled as it moved, a hair's breadth to the left and then a hair's breadth to the right. Only a hair's breadth, and not all at once either. The deceased was a simple Jew without any great crimes to his debt, or any kind of martyrdom to his credit. Petty virtues and petty vices, tiny bits, specks of dust, almost invisible to the eye. Nevertheless, when the pointer moved a hair's breadth to the right, a tone of joy and exultation resounded throughout the upper regions. But when, alas, it moved to the left, a sigh of sadness broke forth and reached up to the very seat of the All-High. The angels continued to pour out slowly and faithfully one little particle after another, one speck of dust after another, just as plain people do when they raise the bidding at a charity auction, penny by penny. Well, even a spring finally runs dry, and the bags were empty at last. All through? Asked the court attendant, one of the busy angels. The advocate and the adversary turned their bags inside out. Nothing was left. Then the attendant walked up to the scale to see which way it tipped, to the right or to the left. He looked and he found himself confronted with a sight not seen since heaven and earth were created. "Why do you take so long?" asked the head of the court. The attendant stammered, "Even. The pointer has come to a stop in the exact center. The good deeds and the evil deeds balance each other exactly." "In the very center?" the court queried again. The attendant took another look and replied, "Absolutely balanced." The Supreme Court deliberated a while and finally arrived at the following conclusion. Since the sins do not outweigh the good deeds, the soul does not belong in hell. On the other hand, since the good deeds do not weigh more than the vices, the portals of paradise cannot be opened for his soul. Hence, the soul must remain homeless. It must fly about between heaven and earth until God remembers it, pities it, and bestows his grace on it, upon it. The attendant took the soul and led it out of the courtroom. The poor soul moaned and bewailed its lot. "Why do you weep?" asked the clerk. "The bliss of paradise may not be yours, but then you also have escaped the torment of hell, torture of hell, and so you have broken even." The soul, however, refused to be comforted. "The worst tortures are better than nothingness. Nothingness is terrible." The court attendant pitied the poor soul and gave it the following advice. "Fly down, dear soul, and flutter about the living world. Don't look up to heaven for what you will see in the sky except stars, luminous but cold, holy and sensitive. Don't look up to heaven, for what will you see in the sky except stars, luminous but cold, holy and sensitive to pity? The stars will not exert themselves on your behalf. They will not remind God of you and your fate. Only the saints of paradise can plead for a poor wandering soul, and saints like gifts, nice gifts. Such is the habit of saints nowadays," he added bitterly. "Fly therefore, O soul, fly down to the living world and observe how it carries on, what it does, and if you see anything of extraordinary goodness and beauty, catch it and fly up with it. Bring it as a gift for the saints in paradise. With this gift in your hand, knock up here and report your presence to the angel at the dormer window. Tell him I asked you to do so. And after you have brought 3 gifts, be assured that the gates of paradise will be open for you. The gifts will be effective. At the throne of the Almighty, it is not the souls of the nobly born that are preferred, but rather the souls of the upward striving." With these words, the attendant of the heavenly court mercifully sent forth from heaven.
All right, so we'll take a little break here for a second. Any reactions? Anything that anybody wants to bring up?
I didn't know Jews had saints.
Well, saints are the Kedoshim, the holy ones.
Ocean,
right?
right.
Which is literally what a saint is, right? The word saint is a holy one. So yes, there are people that were considered very holy. Of course, what is our attendant saying about these saints?
Yeah, they can be bribed.
Yeah, right. That's the way it is these days. Not saints like they used to be.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm surprised.
But of course, they're bribed with acts of beauty and goodness,
Acts of goodness.
and that's what this in limbo soul is being told to look for. Okay. All right. All right. Let the story be the story. Go ahead. The first gift.
The first gift.
Let's read slow.
Okay.
Read slow.
The first gift. The poor soul flew about, hovering above the living world and seeking gifts for the saints of paradise. It flew over towns, villages, and the habitations of men. Between burning rays on hot days and drops of rain in the wet season, between silvery gossamer at summer's close and drifting snowflakes at wintertide. It looked and gazed until its eyes almost popped out. Wherever it saw a Jew, it flew over quickly and peered into his eyes, wondering if he were about to sacrifice himself for his God. Wherever light seeped through an opening in a shutter, the soul was there and looked in, wondering if God's fragrant flowers were perchance growing in the humble home, good deeds done in secret. Alas, in most cases, the soul retreated from eyes and windows, shocked and terrified by what it saw. As seasons and years passed by, the soul almost succumbed to melancholy. Cities turned into graveyards, and graveyards were plowed under to become fruitful fields. Forests were cut down, waters reduced stones to sand, and rivers changed their beds. Thousands of stars fell down, and millions of souls flew upwards. But God was still unmindful of the one soul, which still unsuccessfully looked for a gift of unusual goodness and beauty. The exiled soul brooded. The world is so poor. Human beings have such mediocre gray souls. Their deeds are so petty. How can one expect anything extraordinary from them? I am doomed to wander in eternal exile. In the midst of its brooding, a red flame caught its eye, a red flame in the middle of a dark, overcast night. The soul looked about. The flame was shooting up from a high window. Robbers had broken into a rich man's house, robbers with masks on their faces. One held a burning torch in his hand as a light. Another stood with a glistening knife directed against the victim's breast and repeated over and over again, "A single move, Jew, and you're finished. The point of the knife will come out of your back." The others were opening chests and drawers and removing the contents. The Jew stood with the knife pointed at his breast and watched the scene calmly. Not an eyelash moved over his clear eyes, not a hair of his long white beard stirred. He seemed wholly unconcerned, as if thinking, "The Lord gave and the Lord has taken. Blessed be the name of the Lord." His pale lips murmured, "You're not born with it, and you can't take it with you to the grave." He looked on calmly as the last drawers of the last chests were opened and bags were removed, filled with gold and silver, with jewels and all sorts of treasures. He looked on and was silent. Perhaps he even regarded their loss as his contribution to fate, which had been so kind to him hitherto. Suddenly, however, as the robbers reached the last hiding place and pulled out a little bag, the last and most secret bag, he forgot himself. He was seized with trembling. His eyes glared. He raised his right hand to stop them, and he wanted to cry out, Don't touch. But instead of a cry, a red ray of streaming blood spurted forth. The knife had done its job. His heart's blood bespattered the bag. As he fell, the robbers tore open the bag quickly, expecting the best and most valuable loot. They were, however, bitterly disappointed. In vain had they shed blood. The bag contained neither silver, nor gold, nor jewelry, nor anything of practical value in this world. It had only a bit of earth from the land of Israel, earth which the Jew had preserved for his grave. This was the treasure which the rich man had wanted to save from the hands and the eyes of strangers. and which was bespattered with his blood. The soul catches a bloody speck of this Palestinian earth and brings it to the window at heaven's gate.
Hey, 1 second, please. We'll take a little stop now after the first gift. Any reactions, any thoughts? Yeah, Carol.
What I find very interesting, and it's something I learned when you first came and I took you over to the chapel, that you asked about dirt being from Israel being put in the casket, and to this Jew, everything he had didn't mean anything. But what was so important is that when his time came, that he be buried with dirt from Israel, and that's exactly what I thought of when that is more important than anything else to him, and I found that extremely moving.
All right. Yes, we continue.
Remember, 2 more gifts, said the angel as he closed heaven's window, leaving the soul outside. God will help, thought the hopeful soul as it flew down again in a more cheerful mood. This cheerfulness faded, however, as years and years went by and the soul saw nothing of extraordinary beauty. Sad thoughts again came to the fore. The world gushed forth from God's will just like a spring of living waters, and is now flowing on and on through time. The more it flows, the more earth and dust does it gather. The more turbid and impure does it become, the less gifts for heaven one can find in it. People are becoming pettier, good deeds more minute, sins tinier than specks of dust, actions ever less visible to the eye. A further thought came to the soul. If God were to weigh all the virtues and the vices of the entire world at the same time, the pointer would hardly budge or vibrate. The world too is incapable of moving up or down. It too is wandering aimlessly between the radiant heaven and the dark abysmal pit. The adversary and the advocate would be fighting over it eternally, even as light contends eternally with darkness, warmth with cold, life with death. The world is in constant motion, and yet it can neither ascend nor descend. And for this reason, there will always be weddings and divorces, births and funerals, joyous feasts and fruits of sorrow, love and hate, always, always. Suddenly the soul was roused from its brooding by the noise of trumpets and drums. Looking down, it saw a German city. Slanting roofs encircled the square before the town hall. This square was filled with people in colorful clothes. The windows were crowded with onlookers. People even lay on roofs or sat astride the wooden beams jutting from the walls beneath the roofs. The balconies were overflowing. In front of the town hall was a table covered with a green cloth and gold fringes and tassels. The magistrates sat at the table. They were dressed in satin robes embroidered with golden frogs, and in sable hats with white feathers fluttering from shining buttons. At the head of the table sat the presiding official, wearing a ravenous eagle as an insignia on his hat. On one side, a Jewish girl stood fettered. Near her, 10 attendants held in check a wild horse. The presiding officer arose, turning towards the audience, and read from a paper the sentence pronounced upon the Jewish girl. This Jewess, offspring of Jewish parents, committed a great sin, a monstrous sin which even all-merciful God could not forgive. She stole out of the ghetto on our recent holy day and walked about through our pure streets. She desecrated with her shameless eyes our sacred procession, our holy images which we carried about our streets to the accompaniment of psalms and the beating of drums. With her accused ears,
Accursed ears,
she listened to the singing of our white-robed innocent children and to the music of our holy drums. What certainty have we that the devil, the impure devil, who assumed the shape of this Jewish girl, this accursed rabbi's daughter, did not touch and desecrate one of our pure images? What could he want, the devil, in this beautiful figure? For I cannot deny she is beautiful, as lovely as only the devil can make her. Just look at her insolently sparkling eyes beneath her modestly lowered lashes. Just look at that alabaster face, which long imprisonment paled but did not darken. Just look at her hands and the lean, long fingers transparent in the sunlight. What did the devil want? Was it to tear a soul away from its devotion to the procession? Well, he succeeded. Look at this beautiful girl, exclaimed one of the knights. Look at this beautiful girl, exclaimed one of our knights, a member of one of our finest families. This was too much for us to put up with. The armed attendants noticed her and seized her. The devil in her did not even resist. Why? Because our men were pure. They had just been absolved of all their sins, and so the devil had no power over them. This, therefore, is the sentence pronounced by us upon the devil in the shape of this Jewish girl. She is to be tied by her hair, by her long devilish hair, to the tail of a wild horse. Let the horse gallop and drag her like a corpse over the streets, which her feet stepped on in defiance of our holy laws. May her blood besprinkle our stones and wash off the impurity which her feet have brought to them. A wild shout of joy went up from all the throats about the market square. When the hysteria of wild shouts was over, the doomed girl was asked whether she had any last wish before her death. Yes, she replied, I would like a few pins. She must be out of her mind with terror, muttered the magistrates. No, she answered calmly and coldly, this is my last wish and my only desire. Granted, and now tie her, commanded the presiding officer. The armed attendants went over. Their hands trembled as they tied the black long braids of the rabbi's daughter to the tail of the wild horse, which could hardly be restrained much longer. Stand back, shouted the officer to the crowd in the square. The people fell back and kept close to the walls of the houses. All raised their hands in which they carried whips or rods or kerchiefs. All were ready to chase the wild horse. All breaths were bated. All faces glowed. All eyes blazed. In the excitement, nobody noticed that the doomed girl bent down quietly and pinned the edge of her dress to her feet and stuck the pins deep, deep into her flesh so that her body could not be uncovered when the horse dragged her through the streets. This action was noticed only by the poor wandering soul. Let go, commanded the presiding officer, and the attendants jumped aside. The horse darted forward and a shout arose from all throats. All whips and rods and kerchiefs went into action, whirling and whistling through the air. The terrified horse rushed past the market square, past streets and byways, and far out beyond the town. The wandering soul drew a blood-stained pin from the leg of the dying girl and flew to heaven. Just one more gift, the angel at heaven's gate comforted the soul. The third gift. The soul flew down again, and it needed but one more gift. Again, seasons and years passed by, and the soul once more sank into melancholy. It imagined that the world was becoming still smaller, with pettier people and pettier deeds, good and bad. It reflected, if God, praised be his name, should ever want to stop the world in its course and bring it to judgment, if God were to place on one side an advocate who would pour out of a white bag rubble and specks of dust, and on the other side an adversary who would pour out his bits and crumbs, a long time would elapse before the bags would be emptied. So much pettiness and so many little things. But after the bags were emptied, what would the results show? The pointer most certainly would remain in the middle. With such trivialities, with so much pettiness, what was there that could make an appreciable difference in the weight? What? Another feather, another straw, another grain of chaff, another speck of dust? What would God do with a world in such a condition? What decision would he arrive at? Would he decide to hurl the world back into the void of emptiness? Of course not. The sins do not outweigh the good deeds. Would he decide to redeem the world? Most certainly not. The good deeds do not weigh more than the sins. Was it not more likely that he would just say, go on, fly between hell and paradise, love and hate, pitying tears and steaming blood, cradles and graves, ever on and on? The soul is, however, destined to attain salvation. It is roused from its gloomy thoughts by the sound of drums. Where? When? It did not recognize either place or time. It merely saw the courtyard of a prison. The rays of the sun playfully glided along the iron bars, and the little windows also reflected from the shining metal of the guns stacked up beside the wall. The soldiers were given whips, which they held in their hands. 2 long rows of soldiers were lined up with a narrow passage in between. Someone was to be driven through the gauntlet. Who? A mere Jew of ordinary appearance, with a tattered shirt on his emaciated body and a skull cap on his half-shaven head. Now he was led over to the gauntlet. Why this punishment? Who knows? This happened before our days. It might have been for theft or robbery or cruelty or perhaps even some trumped-up charge. It was, after all, before our age of progress. The soldiers smiled and thought to themselves, why do they line up so many of us? Why, he wouldn't last halfway. He was shoved over and pushed into the passage between the lines. He started to walk. He went erect. He never stumbled nor fell. He received lashes and he endured. Fierce anger gripped the soldiers. He was still walking, still on his feet. The whips whistled through the air like demons. They wound around the body like snakes. The blood of the emaciated body spurted unceasingly. Ha, hoo, ha, hoo, ha. He was halfway through when a soldier struck too high and off came the cap from the head of the victim. After a few paces, the doomed Jew noticed this. He stopped short. He hesitated. He reflected a moment. He made up his mind, and he turned around. He would not go on with head uncovered. He retraced his steps to the spot where the cap had fallen, and he bent down and he picked it up. Then he continued on calmly, red and blood-stained, but with the Jewish cap on his head. He walked erect until he collapsed. And as he fell, the soul flew over and caught the cap, which had caused him so many extra lashes, and rushed with it up to heaven's gate. The third gift was also accepted. The saints interceded in behalf of the poor soul, and the gates of paradise were opened for it after these 3 gifts. The heavenly oracle said, really beautiful gifts, gifts of extraordinary loveliness. They are of no practical use or material value, but their beauty is indeed rare.
All right. So we're going to just leave it up just in case anybody wants to appeal to any piece of the story. That's the story. So any more thoughts to share? Any more comments? Yeah, Carol.
Well, the girl who asked for the pins to so she could cover her feet, that's modesty. She would, no matter what was going to happen to her, she was going to die with modesty.
Right.
And the man who went back for his kippah, he was going to die with it because he always wore a kippah. He was going to die with his kippah on, and the modesty, the dirt, and the modesty and the head covering are what people were more important to them than anything else.
Right. Yeah. So and by the way, if you read that part, and it's in as many ways, this is a very brutal story. This is not, it's written kind of like an old time, legend, but it's really quite gruesome, and there's a lot of tough stuff here. With regard to the rabbi's daughter and her sense of tzniut, of modesty, of course, that's introduced with this religious, set of comments of outrage about this woman who's the devil incarnate, and of course, it's full of innuendo about carnal, erotic attraction and so on. That these other people are outraged about, and that's why they the beautiful Jewess is the temptress, the devil herself, and she has a sense of simple modesty, even to the point of torturing herself in order to preserve her modesty. Yeah, John, you wanted to say something.
A couple of things. When was it written again?
I'm not sure what year it was written. So I don't know. It was toward the end of the 19th century or the beginning of the 20th century.
Because there is something about the victims seem to possess the qualities that the oppressors are claiming, right? So
What do you mean?
the first one is the robbery, and the robbers are looking for something of value, right? And then they don't recognize it when they see it. So so he does recognize it when he sees it. And the second one, the girl.
Not only that, they don't recognize it. It is of no value to them. It has no value to them. It's just dirt for them.
And the girl, there's all this talk about the purity of our soul, our men who were just, atoned or whatever it is, they're all pure. And she's really the pure one. And then the third one is, you have all these soldiers, strong soldiers, and it's really the guy, the victim who's the strongest because he withstands.
They can't imagine that he'd even make it through halfway through the gauntlet, and he pushes himself on behalf of his ideals.
But the end is unsatisfying in some way. It's like, I don't know what it is. I think it's because it's I don't know, maybe it's a modern ear hearing. It seems materialistic, like, oh, these are beautiful icons. It's not really acknowledging the humanity.
So before we decide whether it's satisfying or not, I think that you're right that it's a little off. It's a little unexpected. It's a little, we would have expected, if this was a good old fashioned, fairy tale, and this person was brought into heaven and the beautiful gifts shone forever throughout the sky, and God was so pleased, and so on. But that's not what it is. It actually, the statement ends up becoming a little bit ambiguous. And if we think about these three stories, after all, each one of these stories is about a Jew dying, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ages ago, somewhere in this earth, a Jew died. Is there anything unusual about a Jew dying? And then we get these three extra stories of Jews dying. Each death has within it this token that this soul is able to bring up to heaven. And it's all in the end, what's the effect of all those deaths? What in the end happens as a result of those deaths?
Someone gets to go across the borderline. Barely.
Somebody else gets, extra credit to be able to be included in heaven. There's no further discussion about what about these three people? Or,
well, you sort of imagine they got in.
You would like to think so. Yes, you would like to think so. Again, however, maybe everything else they did during their life outweighs. There's this very, very, really poetically beautiful, as far as I'm concerned, but very, very depressing set of soliloquies that the soul talks about. What a miserable world this is.
Right.
Wow, this is not. So what happens? So how is the world redeemed by these people who hold on to what is holy to them? In the end, this one extra soul gets redeemed. But did the world get redeemed? Did God break down? The soul keeps on thinking about, oh, this, God, what would God, do with this world the way it is? Well, here it is, that, and when is God going to break down and say, okay, enough with the suffering, enough with the bloodshed? So there's a very dark and to a certain extent a kind of a protest. This story, by the end, is not giving heaven, 3 cheers. You know, he's saying, oh, the heavenly oracle, really beautiful gifts. Yeah, beautiful. No, they're completely useless, but very beautiful. Thank you. We really appreciate these chats.
Oh, I forgot I boiled your water. Speaking of sleep.
So there's there's a bitter push on the part of Peretz, where he's both acknowledging the majesty, the unbelievable sanctity and purity of these stories, and at the same time he's saying, so what good is it for heaven? Yeah, John, what do you want to say?
The good, I mean, it sort of poetically, if you look at each event, you think, because he keeps saying over and over again that all the good and all the bad added up is even. So if you look at each story, there's a lot of bad. I mean, a lot of terrible, terrible stuff. And then this one little good thing seems to be in balance with all that bad. So, you know, putting the pins on before she's brutally murdered, or that amount of good outweighs or weighs exactly the same as the bad. If that's true in that story, then goodness has a lot more concentration to it than bad. So in a way, that's a little hopeful because it doesn't take much to push past the needle, you know, push past the even status.
Okay, Josie, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I found the story very disturbing because it's the old saga from Europe of the Jew as victim. No power, no recourse, just the victim of ugliness. And I thought it was an ironic line, although Peretz probably didn't know it, when he said, it's not like this happened, but not in our modern.
He absolutely, that was so ironically put there on purpose.
And look what happened.
That's exactly what he meant. He you know, he was saying on the one hand, these are like ancient stories. No, this doesn't apply to us. We're in a place of progress. And in fact, that's of course part of what his life is all about. You know, this is a little bit, you know, it could be, I claim, you know, seen as an interesting pre-Hanukkah story. And it does follow a little bit on the heels of that lottery ticket story that we read. That was Shalom Aleicham's story about the young man who his father has so much hope for.
Oh, right.
And then he, in order to get ahead in the world, he
Yes.
ends up, what does he do?
Convert.
He abandons the Jewish people. What this story is about stories of people who refused to abandon the Jewish people. But they're put in the ancient past. They're put in times way eons and eons ago, when the soul is like floating around above time and is out there for years and years, and God knows how long they're out there. And we have these like fairy tale legendary stories about a Jew that would give up their life for a yarmulke, or you know, a pure maiden who was, you know, even to the point of pain and death was you know, so meticulous about her concern for her dignity. So so yeah, when he puts that line in, he knows exactly what he's doing. He's doing exactly, you know, you noticed it, and that's good. But this guy, remember, this guy is in the cutting edge of the revolution of modern Jewish life.
Yeah, I was saying, what period did he write in, or what period did he live?
He wrote at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century.
Yeah, when things
So-
look like they might have.
So, and he's writing for the first time, you know, in thousands of years, modern Jewish literature. Right? He's very, very cognizant of his rebellious creativity. He left that world. He left the world of supreme piety, but he loved it, and he wrote about it, and he celebrated it in many ways. But he always had that modern consciousness of, but that's not me.
That's a different.
That's not us. And what do we do with it? In a certain sense, that he's telling the story the way that we have that chassidic story at the beginning that I use sometime as an introduction, We can't light the fire. We don't know where the place is in the forest.
No,
We don't even know the words of the prayer, but we can tell the story.
Yeah.
We're not gonna, not gonna die on behalf of a bag of dirt from the land of Israel. We're not gonna martyr ourselves for for these kinds of things. We've made progress. So that's part of the darkness here also, is
Yes.
recognizing both sides of this. That this is like, and when I mentioned Hanukkah is the first place historically that we have stories of martyrdom on behalf of your faith. So the Hanukkah story, as it's told before the rabbis came on the scene, back in the 2nd century BCE, tells stories of Jews who refused to bow down, so to speak, to the rules and the demands of the Greek Syrians, and they, they're not going to offer a sacrifice. They're not going to eat a piece of treif, and they get slaughtered as a result. They give up their lives to stay Jews as they understand what it means to be a Jew. And then, of course, martyrdom becomes a big deal in Christianity when Christianity first becomes a phenomenon and it gets persecuted by the Romans. So the idea of holy martyrdom gets taken over from those stories of Jewish martyrdom, and they become a major
We've inherited
factor.
quite a history, huh, Rabbi?
That's for sure. Yeah. Carney, were you trying to say something?
No, it was David Kanigas.
Where are you?
I don't know. I don't see myself up here.
Okay, I'm going to stop the screen sharing, and then maybe we'll be able. There you are.
Do you see me? I don't see me.
Now I see you.
Okay.
We see you, David.
Actually, I exist, and
Therefore, you think.
And that is what I find satisfying about this story in a curious way, even pleasing. Here's this soul, and he goes and he doesn't pass muster the first time. So he goes away for years, comes back with a gift, and you know what? They remember him. How many millions of people traipse through Grand Central Station or somewhere, go to the information booth, get turned away, come back 3 or 4 years, and they remember him. He raps at the gate or the door or the dormer or whatever it was, and he disappears again. That's one down, 2 more to go. 3 or 4 years later, he comes back with another
300 or
gift,
400 years later,
or however long it takes, and he's not forgotten. I mean, that is in a way kind of a satisfying aspect to this story.
Good. All right. That's a hopeful idea. Okay, Carol, then John.
It's interesting that in his search for the 3 gifts, because he wasn't told what to find,
Right.
that he picked out the importance of the dirt and then the pit and the modesty and wearing the kippah. He didn't pick out materialistic things. So it's interesting that even though his good deeds and his bad deeds evened out, he learned or knew enough what was important. And I find that very moving.
Yeah, thank you, John.
I just wonder if there's an implied, balance between good and evil in the story. That because it's interesting to me that all the deeds are in fact very, very tiny. Like everything is super tiny, all the evil deeds, and you think like really all the evil is tiny little evils. So maybe part of the message is that if you have a big evil, it takes a big good. Big good, capital G, doesn't happen unless there's bigger evils. So that there's somehow there's a kind of a balance that it always weighs out to 0. Anyway, That's what I'm thinking of, because I think it's interesting that they're so tiny and infinitesimally small.
Well, in general, that's what I think that's what he's saying, is in the end, most of us, like he said, that was a simple Jew. The story begins, a simple Jew dies. You know, how extraordinary is that? We're dying every day. Now, of course, behind that is the idea of we're dying every day also because we're being killed every day. But even just because we're being killed doesn't necessarily make us so special, you know, so unique.
But the story doesn't seem to be just focusing on the simple people. I mean,
Well,
there's that
math.
scene of, you know, they pour everything from the whole world on the scale, and everything's tiny.
Because 99.9% of us are really that kind of run of the mill. At least that's what I'm reading the story saying. Where most of 99% of us were the run of the mill. And here is the job that's being given, the mission is for this soul to find something that really, really extraordinarily jumps out. Now, you know, let's be honest. He's looking around, he sees somebody being very charitable, that doesn't jump out. He sees somebody learning Torah, that doesn't jump out. He sees somebody lighting Shabbos candles, that doesn't jump out. That's part of the run of the mill, according to the way this story's perspective works, right? Yeah, there are people, we're all, and we do minor little offenses and we do minor little mitzvahs, you know, and that's the way life really is for most of us. And then the job of this soul is to come back with the extraordinary, come back with the out of the ordinary, right? And I want to ask, you know, David was saying, look at that, look how wonderful that the soul is remembered. But let's ask also, why should those gifts that somebody else has created, why should those gifts redound to the credit of this simple soul? You know, like I said before, okay, each of these martyrs is extraordinary. Each of these martyrs has gone to the nth degree in their devotion to being a Jew. Why should that have any good effect? Why should the soul get credit for bringing them up? Yeah, Carol.
Because he recognized it.
Right. Yeah, no, I think it's right. That's right there what the story says. Your job is, can you recognize the extraordinary? And what constitutes the extraordinary in your eyes? Right? What is really beautiful here? Right? What is beautiful? And did it get anybody anywhere? You know, that's this kind of like really, again, that ambiguous, you know, statement at the end. But do you notice it? Does that move you? Does that feel like it's special to you? If it feels like it's special to you, then that says something about you.
Yeah.
If you don't feel that it's special to you, and that goes back to John's point earlier, this is about who sees what, right? Remember, these are all, each one of these, there are other people around, right? The robber story is the smallest group of people, right? But the other two are in public, but there's definitely other people around who don't see that there's anything, you know, special about this particular decision or action by the Jewish person who dies, right? But the soul does. This hovering soul is flying around and is saying, no, this is important. This is meaningful. And that comes back, brings me back to Josie's, you know, point. How much does this mean, or what does it mean to us in our progressive day, in our progressive world, in our progressive society, and as Jews today? What is that kind of horrible, terrible, extreme kind of devotion? What does that mean for us? What does it mean? Does it look beautiful to us? Does it look really positive and special to us? Yeah, Josie.
Well, depending on when you were born and when you grew up, it can lead to the hard-boiled attitude that I associate with Israel, which is everybody hates us and we better be tougher than everybody else. I grew up hearing a lot of whispers about the Holocaust, although I was too young to probably understand. I don't know, Rabbi. It's a tough question.
Yeah, I'm not saying that I have an answer that I'm asking people to give.
There's only Only
Good,
one of the stories, the robbery story, does there seem to be a possibility that if he kept his mouth shut, he wouldn't have been hurt, right? So though that's different than it doesn't, putting the pins on, she's going to get dragged anyway, and then in the gauntlet, kippah or no kippah, it's going to end the same way. So I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
right. So
Because in those situations, in his situation, I feel like, why did he just keep his mouth shut?
he couldn't.
Life is better than a little pocket of dirt,
Right. So that's the rational idea. You're right. And he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. And that's part of what the
Right, but why is that held up as a good thing? Because wouldn't God be happier if he was alive?
God apparently is happy with a Jew that can't control his love for Israel, right? Who cannot dispense and rationalize away their emotional connection to Israel. Now, of course, even that has, ambivalence to it. He's connected to the earth of Israel, but he didn't make Aliyah. Same thing with Peretz. Peretz was a Zionist, but he didn't make Aliyah. So that's part of what's going on here also. But on the other hand, and certainly when Peretz is writing, and he dies right before the Russian Revolution, so it's 1915, right? He sees Jews by droves deciding that the communist vision of world, peace is the answer. Let's all just disappear from our own individual, identity. There were many, many, many more Jews who were communists than Zionists, right? Before the Zionism didn't become the consensus among the Jewish people until after the Holocaust. So this is his kind of like, putting in there that idea that we should bow down before a Jew who can't control their love for just an ounce of soul from the land of Palestine. It's not at all rational. And the other two choices that the other Jews make, yes, they're going to die anyway, but the choices that they make are, in a certain sense, irrelevant. What you're going to be dead. So therefore right now you want to torture your own self by sticking yourself with pins, because after you're dead, you're afraid that somebody's going to see your knee, or the Jew that's going to die. You're going to die. So no, I'm going to die with my yarmulke on. Right? This is an arbitrary choice. It's not rational. It's not at all rational here, for any of these people. So yeah. I want to take a minute or two to read out to you a classic text that I'm pretty sure that Peretz was very familiar with. And this is from Maimonides, The Laws of Repentance. So he's writing about the the mitzvah to always try to improve your life and to rethink your life. And he talks about the sounding of the shofar as an alarm clock, a spiritual alarm clock. Wake up. It's a very beautiful, I'll read it anyway. While the sounding of the shofar on the new year is a decree of the written laws, still it has a deep meaning, as if saying, awake, awake, O sleeper, from your sleep. O slumberers, arouse yourselves from your slumbers, examine your deeds, return in repentance, and remember your Creator. Those of you who forget the truth in the follies of the times and go astray the whole year in vanity and emptiness, which neither profit nor save. Look to your souls, improve your ways and works, abandon, every one of you, his evil course and the thought that is not good. So now here comes the point that I wanted to bring up for this story. It is necessary, therefore, that each person should regard himself throughout the year as if he were half innocent and half guilty, and should regard the whole of humankind as half innocent and half guilty. If then he commits one more sin, he presses down the scale of guilt against himself and the whole world and causes his destruction. If he fulfills one commandment, he turns the scale of merit in his favor and in favor of the whole world, and brings salvation and deliverance to all his fellow creatures and to himself. As it is said, the righteous man is the foundation of the world. That is to say, he who acts justly presses down the scale of merit in favor of all the world and saves it. So that's that same image of, at any given moment, it really basically the point values have accumulated. It's a tie game, and all the good stuff. There's been plenty of good stuff, but guess what? There's also been plenty of bad stuff, and it's all in the end up calculating to be a tie. And you can do that at the buzzer. You can do that one more three-pointer, that one more shot, that one more goal. And if you can do that, you win. And not only you, because you are not in isolation. You are one person in the entire world, and the world's totals are being calculated at this very moment. So each and every mitzvah that you can do has the potential of redeeming the entire world. That's, I think, the background text, but what we have in Peretz is more complicated and more questioning, because in the end, Peretz is saying, no, if this was happening, how come the world hasn't been redeemed? Look at these extraordinary people that have given their lives. How come this didn't redeem the world? Maybe it redeemed one person. Maybe it gives us a story to tell. But what's the future going to be? So with that happy idea to going to celebrate Hanukkah, sing and dance and enjoy yourselves, and we'll hopefully meet again next week. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yasher Koach.
Yasher
Thank
Koach.
you, Rabbi.